But yeah, no, I guess where to start as well with this kind of conversation as well, because it's such a broad topic as well,
Yeah,
because
it
obviously
is.
we're gonna be celebrating, like, Mother's Day on Sunday, and I wanted to reach out and chat to you, one, selfishly to find out about motherhood from a different perspective from a woman working in sport,
Yeah.
and any door tips, and two, just to have a conversation about motherhood in cricket, and especially at Western Storm where there are already mothers within the team playing and fulfilling their careers. So
Yeah.
where do you think a good place to start is?
Oh God, where to start really? It's a good question. I mean, the whole motherhood, yeah, working in cricket thing's a really interesting one because like I definitely probably a bit like you, like love what I do. And so that was a really big thing to get my head around of kind of going, oh God, there's gonna be something else that I'm gonna love as much as my work. How on earth am I gonna do this? Like, how am I going to commit to everything, 100%? And so that was definitely and I was really concerned initially. I had a few fears. I was like, oh, I don't, I love my job and I, want to keep moving forward with that. And, would it be kind of a big halt on all of that by, having a child and everything else? And so, there's definitely lots of things that I felt around that where I was thinking, how is this all going to work? And even now, honestly, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I'm obviously getting to the point now starting to think about returning and things and kind of just looking at what that balance is. And I think maybe, little Mila, bless her, she's 5 months now. And she's awesome, like lovely, happy baby. She's quality. And it's so nice spending time with her. And I think now perhaps in a strange sort of way, I might actually kind of hit that work-life balance better by having two things. So initially I was kind of thinking, oh my God, one's going to come to the detriment of the other. And actually maybe it just might help me be a more balanced human as a consequence. So I think sort of trying to look at it that way, and try and make sure I can commit to everything at Western Storm the best possibly I can, but also make sure that I don't leave anything behind with the little one because she's only little once. And yeah, so I don't quite know the answer to how I get that balance, but I'm really mindful that I want to try and do everything. And but it might just take a little bit of juggling and a bit of working out and probably a few mistakes in the process to work out really where that balance is perhaps.
Yeah, because I've done, like, a lot of reading about, like, in an athlete position of athlete mother in conflict and all these different things. I wrote a paper on, like, Serena Williams and stuff. But then when it comes to, like, a working mother in sport, there's kind of less discussed about that, and how you actually find that balance is gonna be so interesting for me when I get to that point in July, hopefully, and everything's moving. Because for me, I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna jump straight back into it, and I want to keep working and stuff, but I don't want to sacrifice that moment as well." Like, you want to make the most of actually having some maternity and enjoying your child as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you'll honestly know. Like someone said to me, you won't know until you actually get on that leave and she's here, how you're gonna feel. And I was very much like you. I was like, I'll be back in 6 months, I'll be back in 6 months. And the time goes so quickly. I mean, sometimes I'm doing around the days and nights can be really long, but they go quick as well. And suddenly you're at the end of a week again and it's blown by. I mean, mine is 5 months now, and just the time has gone in an absolute flash. And so they do come along and change your perspective on everything a little bit. And they're so immersive. There's no switching off from being a mum really in that respect in these early days. And so there's no half measures to it. You are in and you're very much in the mix of it. And for that reason the time does go really, really quickly, because I just thought, really naively, oh my God, I'm so bored on mat leave, what am I going to do, like how am I going to fill my days? It's quite used to being busy and 2 or 3 locations a day, lots of meetings, lots of cool stuff going on work wise. And honestly, like the days are just kind of, it's a different kind of work, I guess. Like they're full on and so it's definitely kind of you barely shower. If I get up and I've had a shower and a breakfast and a coffee like somewhere near breakfast time, I'm like, that's pretty much a win. So yeah, in the early days, like you have to just completely recalibrate what a good day looks like and what success looks like. And then but it gets easier, much easier the older they get. So yeah, I'm not sure kind of, I think you just have to take it as it comes potentially. But coming back to your point around sort of examples of people have done it, I felt exactly the same. So I was looking around in the cricket world going, actually, I don't know too many people that have done this in kind of roles like mine. I was kind of, and that was reflective in some of like the policies behind the scenes that kind of, maybe hadn't been developed and things like that. So there was a real like sense of kind of genuinely feeling like I was gaining some quite uncharted territory, because I was looking around going, I can't see too many others who have got roles like mine who love their career, who are doing this. So yeah, that was something as well where I was kind of thinking, yeah, you feel a little bit vulnerable, I guess, as a consequence of that, because you've not got anyone else to look ahead to and kind of go, oh, yeah, they've done it, that's fine. It's, you sort of slightly feel like, yeah, the first sometimes. I'm sure that's not true, I'm sure there are people, but just in my like sphere that I would know. Yeah, so building a network, I guess, is quite key in that. And
well, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's the whole kind of see it to be it and everything like that. And obviously so many women do become mothers and do work, and it's normal, but when you don't have access to those kind of people and role models, it's not an easy conversation to have all the time. It is that uncertainty and is that vulnerability, like you mentioned. Like for me, I'm still at the start of my career, and it's okay at the moment and stuff, but I was so scared about announcing kind of my pregnancy and telling people, because I was like, oh, people are going to stop giving me opportunities, and people are going to be like,
yeah.
oh, she's going to be away for this long and she's not going to want to return and she's not going to want to do this. But for yourself as well, obviously heading up the whole region in an established role, which is still quite dominated by men. How
Yeah.
did you find it? Because it is a different kind of topic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think then that partly comes back to kind of, I guess, the, not having too many other people having gone down that path. It's also like lots of HR policies and stuff, I think, are quite reflective of the fact it's been quite a male dominated profession as well. She's looking at maternity policies and this, that, the other, like they, some of them probably are a little bit outdated perhaps in terms of what modern day expectations might be now amongst some of the samples of ones that I got to see. And actually the UCB one was pretty good. And actually that was really, really good thing at Storm, was that, I was supported well. And actually, although it took a little while to get policies and stuff sorted, when we got there, it was really good. And we're mirroring what the UCB do, and their policy is really great. But the cross section of different ones out there, actually, it was really reflective of the fact that it was probably a policy that's probably been in a cupboard quite a lot, very, very rarely dusted off, because it's not been a massive live working concern, given there's not that many women relative to men working in cricket. So that was definitely really insightful to kind of go into that world and kind of be like, blimey, like what conditions am I going to experience? How long can I take off? How am I going to be looked after and supported? And, we definitely got there with all of that. And I'm really grateful, for the support kind of that I've had to be able to have this mat leave with Mila. And, in a strange way, I think it'll just mean I'm even more committed to work almost because I'm so grateful for that support almost. I'm not resentful for having missed anything, and kind of that just, leaves me feeling really fond towards that support that I've seen. But yeah, I think it's an area, isn't it, we're hearing a lot about from a playing perspective as well. And it's probably something, as we get more and more females into coaching roles and other roles, which is obviously the aim, to broaden out the nature of people working in the game, probably it's going to have to be in lots of different areas, a good hard look at lots of policies and things, just to make sure, that they are sort of more in tune with modern thinking, and reflective of a broader population.
Because when it comes to for players as well, is there that protection for players at the moment? Because I know obviously the precarity around 1-year contracts, there's not that stability at the moment for players. So if a player was to get pregnant during their 1-year contract, would they be entitled to maternity, or is that kind of not on the cards and still evolving at the moment?
Yeah, it's such a good question. Like it's definitely on people's radars. I wouldn't know, I guess because I've had a little bit of time away being on mat leave, I wouldn't know if that's evolved to the point where there are now policies, but I know certainly the PCA would, just before I was sort of ironically finishing work to go on mat leave, ask you about policies, at which point I barely had a policy myself. So there was a real irony in that they were asking a very pregnant woman what the policies was, and I didn't know what my own was at that stage, for players. So I don't know if it's as established as it should be, but I do know it's on people's minds. And, as the game grows and the investment grows, people are potentially going to try and do both a little bit more. And, we need to support that, I think. And obviously we've got, Claire, and we've got Nicole, obviously at Western Storm, who are in a slightly different sort of category because they've obviously have careers separate to playing. But, at some point, somebody who's on a contract will want a family, or an England player may want a family, and it's going to happen. So we need to be ready for that. And obviously, Australia seem to be leading the way in that regard in lots of things they're doing, from, the protection the players get from the, you know, the family children support that can travel with them. They seem to really have a grasp on that area. So, you know, no doubt we'll be probably looking to them for what good looks like a little bit.
Yeah, it would definitely be welcome, because we've seen within the like women's football, the domestic side there, that those kind of policies are coming into play, and they've had a bit of a head start in terms of that domestic professionalism, I guess. But
Yeah.
how do the players like Nicole and Claire, who have recently come back into the squad after obviously having their own children, how do they kind of fit back in, and how did you kind of adapt that? Because we're looking at back, was it 2020, 2021 now for those two?
Yeah, so I mean, Nicole, bless her, like just yeah, I just remember really vividly this conversation actually when obviously the regional stuff was announced, and I remember reaching out to Nicole saying, oh look, you know, what do you think, Western Storm, where you at, kind of, because obviously she scored a boatload of runs and made a really good performer in county cricket for quite some time, and you know, didn't quite get her chance in the KSL era, but obviously this was perfect for Nicole. And I remember her kind of emailing me back going, I'm so sorry I've not replied to you, I'm actually pregnant. I was like, oh my god, right, okay. So kind of we left it there, and I just said, look, you know, all the best of it, keep in touch, etc., etc. You know, we'll pick up again when you're ready, like no rush whatsoever. You know, hope everything goes on. Of course, at that point we had no idea the journey Nicole was obviously going to go on, which you've covered before. So I just, and then followed up with Nicole sort of a bit later on then, sort of after Jonty had arrived and had grown a bit, and I just, you know, messaged Nicole. I said, look, what do you think? Like, I was really clear in my head that I just didn't want it to be assumed that she didn't want to play cricket. And I think that's the natural assumption people might make when she's had a baby. I was like, well, no, like that's lazy. At least find out the answer to that question and ask. So you had a bit of a chat with Nicole to see how she was feeling about stuff. And we have like in Storm, we have like hubs around the region. So we've got one in Truro and Cardiff, Bristol, Exeter, and you know, wherever's sensible to have them really. And so we kind of knew there'd be a local training option for her in Truro, which could fit in quite nicely with obviously, you know, not being away from Jonty too much and kind of easing her way back in. And we just opened up and said, look, come along, see how you feel, no pressure. You know, we'll support you if you want to do this. If you don't, it's completely fine. There's no pressure. And, you know, Nick being Nick, I think it was, you know, she's a really determined character. She loves her cricket. She wants to improve. She wants to be better. And, you know, I'm sure there was some hesitation at times because it was a bit COVID era, and she'd obviously been through so much that, you know, the idea of getting back out into the world and doing some stuff was obviously probably pretty scary at times. But, you know, she threw herself into it. And I guess the rest is history really. But it was just that initial point of going, I just need to ask, I need to see where she's at and check. And similarly with CT, you know, it's absolutely the same example of, you know, no pressure to come back, but keep in touch with us, tell us how you're doing. And you know, I guess Nicole was a little bit kind of into the fold almost before the full sort of science and medicine team got in. CT was slightly different because we sort of by then had an established S&C physio and things. And even then, I think our science and medicine team would say there's not a massive amount of support, like, or research out there for how you return a player, you know, who's had a baby or C-section, or all of those things back into playing competitive cricket. So that feels, I'm sure people are doing that work behind the scenes, but that feels like a really big area. So, you know, we just worked, you know, really closely with them as individuals with their progress, and just to try and give them individualized programs they could do locally to home for them, support them as best we could. And, you know, both of them are such driven characters who, you know, who wanted to come back. And so they were so incredibly diligent and doing everything that was put their way. You know, and CT stayed really fit during her pregnancy. Like, she was still doing 5Ks at about 35 weeks, like absolute mad scenes, which like, but you know, if you know her as a character, you know that's probably not a surprise. And I think we just wanted to let them know that, you know, the door's not closed for them. It's in their court completely. We'll try and support them as much as we can to come back. And you know, they both proved us right that you can do it. So there's two great role models and examples there of, you know, how it can be done. And I'm sure it wasn't easy, but they've done it. So yeah, and I guess the other stuff we worked around the scenes was just how we could make their lives easier than by having children and playing, because obviously we're on the road a bit and things like that. So we tried to just talk with both of them really and see what would help, you know, whether it's parking in a certain place in the ground, whether it's access to, you know, microwaves to heat things, or, you know, a separate room for feeding, or what can we do that's just gonna, you know, family rooms maybe if we're traveling separately from the bus, those little day-to-day things that in isolation aren't much, but, they really do, they can help, they can make a difference. So we worked with both of the players quite closely to kind of try and get a list of things almost again, what would help, and kind of took that to the ECB and said, look, here's what we're hearing from these two. And actually what I want to do is I liaised a bit with Joe Kirk on this, is try and get it written into the operational guidelines. So it wasn't just about Western Storm, oh, I've got to cover, a couple of mums. We're the difficult team because we need more, we need this, we need that. Actually, it just becomes part of the standard operating guidelines for every venue, that if there's a mum and they've got their player and they've got their child with them, X, Y, and Z just will be in place as standard. So it just became more normalized. So that was where we tried to get to with things. There's still probably more to be done, to be honest, but it was just a step in the right direction, I guess. But yeah, we were the team obviously that had two mums when no other team did at that stage. So we were, I guess, the difficult ones, so to speak. But we were met with lots of good grace and help with that stuff, which was really good to see.
Yeah, because I like I say, it needs to be the norm, just not obviously an inconvenience. Like, it is part of being a woman, and if you want to go down the route of having children and stuff whilst playing and stuff, it needs to be there. No kind of questions asked, no kind of pressure to feel awkward about it. It should just be written in, like you said. And the other part of it as well, what you mentioned about Nicole, I loved seeing in the 100 pictures of her and Jonty. And I think that visibility piece as well is so important, because obviously, like, the history of the women's game in the amateur days, you had people, we spoke to Enid Bakewell, and she was talking about taking her child around the boundary rope and all those kind of fond memories and stuff, but there's less images of those moments, whereas now we actually get to see that.
Yeah, it's very human, isn't it? It's very real, I think, and I think that's a really good thing. And it's just, it's not compartmentalizing people's lives. It's kind of going, I do this, but I also do that, and like, people see all of it, they don't just see the tiny proportion of it. And I think that's quite a healthy place to be, that people can be themselves and to the outside world who they are, what they are, and what comes with them. And for those two, for Claire and Nick, they've got obviously their little ones, and that's part of things. It's just, as I say, normalizing it, isn't it, just to be seen.
It's just that whole kind of like, see it to be it, and the role model piece, and just showing that it is okay, even though like in other areas of life this conversation would feel so strange, because people would be like, well, yeah, of course it's okay, but in sport it feels very separate and distant and not so normal.
Well, yeah, the women's game's still quite new. I think that's the key thing, isn't it? You were only, 5 years ago the KSL was launched. So prior to that point, it was pretty much international cricket only. And so, it's still in its infancy, isn't it? And so sort of with these scenarios are then into the wider world, they're not new at all. They're completely normal, and they're old, they're boring, in fact, in many instances. In the women's game, because of where it's at in its stage of development, they actually are still quite new and quite novel. And of course, hopefully as time goes on, that just becomes a, oh yeah, so-and-so's here and so's the family today. It's not even a thing, it's just that's how it is. But I guess at the moment there's still quite a lot of firsts in the women's game. We're still finding that quite a bit, from the first contracts to the first, whatever it might be, because of its stage of development. So, hopefully the more it evolves, the more it grows, then, the more work we can get done to normalize a lot of this.
And then moving on to your role as regional director of Western Storm. Yeah. What does that actually entail, and what does your kind of day-to-day look like? Because I think there's a lot of distance sometimes between seeing like people like yourself, and we're like, those roles look amazing and I'd love to do that one day, but what is that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's a really broad role, first and foremost. I think so. I would assume responsibility for the overall running of Western Storm, and we're a bit different in the sense that we're a limited company. So some of the others are structured slightly differently, who are kind of a bit more embedded into kind of first class counties. We're obviously a separate company, so to speak. So obviously our board of directors include Glamorgan, Gloucestershire, Somerset CEOs, and it's so therefore we're set up a little bit differently. So I guess I'm responsible for the cricket, overseeing the cricket. Obviously the head coach would directly be in charge of player performance and results and things, but overseeing the performance side of things there, but also the business side of things as well. So actually, how do we bring in sponsors so we can grow the investment into performance cricket, not just solely that the money we receive from the ECB, but how can we leverage that to make sure that we can expand the program, so we can add more contracts or more staff or whatever it is to the benefit of the women's game. So and I guess with that comes a little bit of an input around kind of social media and things as well, which is really hard because we don't have probably the resource we would all like in the regions. To be honest with you, we don't receive any resource towards that at all. So what you're seeing, the efforts that going in are kind of either bulged in potentially to some first class county roles that exist, or they're people like me or some other people and they're doing their best, which is fine to a degree, but obviously that needs to move and evolve forward from a visibility perspective. If we, if we've got these fab role models and things like that, it's going to live on die and who can see them fundamentally. So I think there's some real work to be done there. So that's ended up a little bit in my role. All sorts of, so diverse really. But then in normal times, I would have quite a key eye on how we engage in the community side of things, how we're making sure Western Storm is actually inspiring girls in the region. They know it exists, they've got a connection to it, whether that's kind of inspiring them to play or to come and watch. And that's been where for me COVID's been really hard, because a lot of my background was working in that development side of things. So I like joining at top to bottom. I like the 10-year-old girls coming to something Storm do and then seeing them at a game. Like, I really like that side, and COVID has been quite restrictive in that. The ability to get out, been under quite strict protocols and what we can and can't do. So that's been pretty tough to really feel like we've made a mark in that area the way we'd like to. But hopefully, obviously now moving forward, that's something that can change and we can be a bit more present in the wider region, the wider world. And I guess it's working with Dan as well to make sure we've got an academy program that's well supported, it's got resource in the right areas to make sure that, the good work the counties are doing in the region, has been really backed up, and the players who come into the academy are really accelerating towards whatever their next step might be. And that might be towards playing for Western Storm. It might be being an outstanding county player. It could be diversifying into other areas of the game. And our job is to try and, create some really well-rounded individuals who can hopefully be on that programme and contribute back out into cricket in a positive way. So, that's a really fluffy answer for just like so many different things that you find yourself doing. It is broad. And I think sometimes it's challenging because it's broad, because there's so many things you want to do, and actually time, resource, doesn't always allow for it. So just before I went on mat leave, actually, we'd started a process of really getting stuck into writing a Western Storm strategy. And it had to take a bit of a pause because obviously I wasn't going to be there. And actually we've had some staffing changes since. So it's probably a natural break for it to pick it back up when I'm back and really hammer it home. But that was going to be something that would actually really set out really clearly, going, right, what are Western Storm about? How does this fit in with all the counties in the region? How are we going to make sure the South West and Wales is an outstanding place for women and girls to be? And we have some amazing counties, I will say that. There's so much great work recreationally going on. You only need to kind of look at Twitter to just see how many new clubs are forming, how many new league entries are booming, and that plays its part in a strange way around Western Storm's success. What happens there is the absolute bedrock of who we attract into the game, and from there we can then find the right pathway forward for those people. So it's, for me, I see Storm as being part of something much bigger in the region. Yes, it's a professional entity and we've got our bit in it, but if everyone's doing their part right and the counties are running their age groups really well and things like that, then the performance stuff will absolutely thrive as well. So every step needs to work in that, really, for the game to thrive in the region.
Yeah, I definitely think Western Storm is one of the strongest for all of that as well. Like, you do get to see quite a lot of it going on, and lots of people, I guess, associate Storm from the KSL days as well, which I guess is a hidden advantage too.
Yeah.
But part of that as well is the fan piece of it feels like a family-friendly club generally for fans.
Oh, that's good to know. I think we're really lucky with the venues we play in. I think both Bristol and, Taunton are obviously very, very, like, historically, they host a lot of women's cricket internationals and they've hosted a lot of KSL stuff. So I think that helps because they're obviously very warm to women's cricket and very family friendly, I think, in their ethos. And obviously we've last year played at Spy Gardens for the first time, which was lovely. And again, with the great work that Leisha's doing there, Cricket Wales wise, I do feel like we're very fortunate to have 3 counties. It allows us to be who we are, and that makes sense, without being anything different, because I think that is how we feel at Storm. We are, I think, just quite a down-to-earth bunch who, most if not all are from the region. They love the region. They've all got a story to tell about their journey through cricket. through the Southwest or through Wales, and they genuinely love what it's about and what it represents. And I hope that does come through, to be fair, because I'd love like young girls to know what Western Storm is and be really want to play for us. Almost as a foregone conclusion, they're not thinking about anything else, they just want to come and play at Storm. And hopefully if we can sort of have that family feel to us, then that will go a long way.
Yeah, I definitely see a sense of home within Storm massively, and getting to be back in Taunton like last year, I was like, it's a feeling that you can't describe it. Just it is that sense of belongingness and being from the Southwest and that sense of pride.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everyone feels that, whether they're from sort of the depths of Cornwall or whether they're, from West Wales, like there is a pride, I think, in each and every player that plays for Western Storm and their connections into that region. I think that's not to be underplayed. Like, I think, pretty much all of our players have had a journey through cricket and a connection back in to the region in some way, shape or form. And really interestingly, actually, I'm not going to spoil too much, but very shortly we've got a bit of a launch coming, I guess, of what our kit's going to look like, which is a really cool piece of work. I can take virtually no credit for it whatsoever, but yeah, that's really cool. And actually there's a bit of a story then around the kit and stuff which kind of plays into that as well, so obviously keep an eye out for that. But it's a really cool story as to kind of the kit and the shirt and how it got to the design it did and stuff. So that's one to keep an eye out for when that comes. Should be coming in a week or so's time. So yeah,
that's really exciting. Although my mind went completely to tractors and Sophie Luff on a that kind of
easily done cider. Yeah, easily done. Oh,
but my final question is just about going back to work now. So how are you feeling about going back to a role? You've mentioned you're excited, and obviously it's going to be amazing to have Mila looking up to you as well within your role. So tell us a little bit about what's to come.
Yeah, so I mean, just actually one bit of advice for you actually, Hannah, is do think about childcare early. Like, did not realize how early you need to be onto that. So that's been a little bit of a learning for us. But yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to returning. I think it's as I said before, I love the job. I love the cause, the why of why we're doing what we're doing. Always have done in all the roles I've held in cricket. So my motivation drive is absolutely still there. So yeah, we're just trying to basically work out just childcare arrangements so that we can kind of get back in and get cracking. It's probably, obviously there's conversations to be had around that and kind of how many days a week that looks like and what can be done. So probably unfair for me to speak too much about that until I've actually had those conversations, but hoping to be back sort of earlyish part of the summer, ready to catch a lot of cricket again and kind of get back into everything. So yeah, it is quite, it's quite cool having a little girl. I think I've always known my why. It's not taking me to have a daughter to realize that. Like, I've always known it. But yeah, it is quite cool, to think that she's going to grow up in a world that's going to look so incredibly different to what we've grown up in. And, hopefully the landscape there is going to be full of opportunities, lots of role models, proper solid investment, so there is really no limit to what can be achieved. And that's really cool, to go to work each day and know that, bit by bit you're doing your part in that, and there's lots of other people doing their parts too. But it's pretty cool to know that, yeah, she's going to kind of grow up in an environment surrounded by pretty cool females. And the Storm girls have met her a couple of times actually, and they absolutely love her. Like, they're like, give her here. I'm like, great, there's 15 new aunties, a couple of new uncles in there as well, which is really lovely. So yeah, it's again, it comes back to that family feel, doesn't it, of homely, and she'll probably just be part of the setup like everyone else is, to be honest, and they're disappointed if she doesn't turn up. So but that's pretty cool. So yeah, it is, it's daunting thinking about returning. My biggest concern at the moment is just absolute clarity when I come back, particularly if it's not full-time, of just what my role is, so that I can do it to the best of my ability. I'd hate to feel like I'm unclear, I've got too much on my plate, which means I can't feel like I'm giving 100%. I think that's the bit that niggles me the most, is that in some way I might let someone down because I'm not there full time, or I can't be there all the time like I might have been before, because these kind of roles, they're not 9 to 5 sometimes. Your phone is going late at night or in the weekends or whatever. Your day off is not necessarily your day off. It kind of encroaches into all sorts of space. And I guess having Mila now, it's going to be a little bit tougher. So, sometimes they're going to be hard lines. Sometimes I'm like, look, I can't pick that call up now, and that's just it. Do the best you can, but that's going to be a learning for me as as well, to have to work differently. So yeah, there's a few things, but you know, that's something for me I'm going to have to just try and work through. And I've actually been made aware of somebody who actually specializes in this, exactly this scenario, so it might be a good contact for you down the line, Hannah, as well, when you're thinking about this. But who actually helps females get back to work, but work through those kinds of, you know, issues and anxieties and concerns. Obviously clocked a niche in the market, I would suggest. Yeah, to realize, but it's a big step. It's a big step back. I'm not worried about coming back to work. I'm just worried about juggling everything. That's the main thing, really, and making sure that I'm still a really good mum to Mila. That's the big thing.
Yeah, no, like that's where kind of like my anxieties are and stuff, and it's unspoken about. I think people just kind of assume, don't they? They're just like, oh, you'll be fine, you're just, you know, you have your baby, you crack on and you get back to work. And it's all that kind of downtime that people just don't talk about, and those thoughts and feelings and uncertainty. And it's so good to actually just hear your experiences and what you're going through right now, so I can actually kind of prepare for it quite selfishly. You know, the interview's not just about me getting advice, but
no, it's all good, honestly. And you know, anytime, like, ask away, because I don't pretend to have the answers. I just know kind of all the different things that have cropped up through my head at certain points, you know, that have gone through my mind, and it definitely helps to get them out loud and talk about them. And quite often they're not real, if that makes sense. Once you say them out loud and you problem solve them, you realize they're utterly ridiculous. But you know, when they sit and fester in your head, they sort of hold a bigger place in there than they should. So it's definitely, yeah, it always helps to talk these things through. And that's, you know, that's a process I'm probably going to go through before I return, to make sure that, you know, I've worked through that in my head, you know, to be in the best place possible, that when I come back I feel ready for it. And you know, I've worked through some of the things that were sort of troubling me before. So it's but it's a massive life-changing event. I think is you can't put, you know, too big an emphasis on that. And you know, to expect to think you're just going to waltz in and nail it is, you know, it's probably better to have those anxieties and work through them than it is to be blissfully unaware of what might come and then be hit with it later down the line. So I think it's probably the right way to be, to have it all going through your mind. But you know, equally, sometimes I think it's not as big in your head as you maybe think, if that makes sense, as well. Lots of people do it and they'll be fine. And it's amazing. You're on an amazing journey. You've got so many exciting things ahead. And try not to worry about that other stuff, because, you know, it will all look after itself. But I also understand where the worries come from, because I had them exact same ones as well.
And hopefully you'll get to play with Mila as well and be in the same team and have that kind of relationship and stuff, because
oh god, yeah, that would be so fun. Yeah, that'd be hilarious, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's so true. I haven't even thought about that yet. But no, she's already somebody told me, actually, this is really bad, but somebody told me they'd looked into the odds of her captaining England, and it's like 1 to 10,000. So I was like, maybe that's worth a tenner. Maybe that's worth a tenner. But yeah, I mean, I'd certainly not. Like, I hope she loves whatever she does. Like, I'm one of those where, yeah, she probably will end up liking cricket because she's surrounded by it, but don't want to be that when he's forcing it on her. So the irony is, though, already we're kind of like, no, she doesn't watch cartoons. We try to be quite good with it. And then we kind of reflect on it the other day, and we're like, but we have had the World Cup on, the Big Bash on, and I kind of like, so actually, she actually does watch quite a lot on TV, but it's cricket. So we're like, surely that's okay. Surely that's all right. So yeah, she's actually seen a lot of women's cricket, bless her. So she'll be socialised into it, I'm sure. But
thank you so much for sparing some time.
You're welcome. It's been fun.